good evening. I hope you've had a great day today. Welcome to BVJ's Bedtime Stories. I'm bigvoicejay, and this is a show where we get you ready for a good night's sleep with public domain short stories just for you. Links to all the stories can be found at the show notes at bedtimewithbvj.com. And if you'd like to support the show, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link on every page and post. Tonight's story, The Adventure of the Retired Colourman, by Arthur Conan Doyle. Sherlock Holmes was in a melancholy and philosophic mood that morning. His alert, practical nature was subject to such reactions. "Did you see him?" he asked. "You mean the old fellow who has just gone out?" "Precisely. Yes, I met him at the door." "What did you think of him?" "A pathetic, futile, broken creature." "Exactly, Watson, pathetic and futile. But is not all life pathetic and futile? Is not his story a microcosm of the whole? We reach, we grasp, and what is left in our hands at the end? A shadow, or worse than a shadow, misery. Is he one of your clients?" "Well, I suppose I may call him so. He has been sent on by the yard, just as medical men occasionally send their incurables to a quack. They argue that they can do nothing more and that whatever happens, the patient can be no worse than he is." "What is the matter?" Holmes took a rather soiled card from the table. "Josiah Amberley. He says he was junior partner of Brickful and Amberley, who are manufacturers of artistic materials. You will see their names upon paint boxes. He made his little pile, retired from business at the age of 61, bought a house at Lewisham, and settled down to rest after a life of ceaseless grind. One would think his future was tolerably assured." "Yes, indeed." Holmes glanced over some notes which he had scribbled upon the back of an envelope. "Retired in 1896, Watson. Early in 1897, he married a woman 20 years younger than himself. A good-looking woman, too, if the photograph does not flatter. A competence, a wife, leisure, it seemed a straight road which lay before him, and yet within 2 years he is, as you have seen, as broken and miserable a creature as crawls beneath the sun. But what has happened? The old story, Watson. A treacherous friend and a fickle wife. It would appear that Amberley has one hobby in life, and it is chess. Not far from him at Lewisham there lives a young doctor who is also a chess player. I have noted his name as Dr. Ray Ernest. Ernest was frequently in the house, and an intimacy between him and Mrs. Amberley was a natural sequence, for you must admit that our unfortunate client has few outward graces, whatever his inner virtues may be. The couple went off together last week, destination untraced. What is more, the faithless spouse carried off the man's deed box as her personal luggage with a good part of his life savings within. Can we find the lady? Can we save the money? A commonplace problem so far it has developed, and yet a vital one for Josiah Amberley. What will you do about it?" "Well, the immediate question, my dear Watson, happens to be, what will you do? If you'll be good enough to understudy me. You know that I am preoccupied with this case of the 2 Coptic patriarchs, which should come to a head today. I really have not time to go out to Lewisham, and yet evidence taken on the spot has a special value. The old fellow was quite insistent that I should go, but I explained my difficulty. He is prepared to meet a representative." "By all means," I answered. "I confess I don't see that I can be of much service, but I'm willing to do my best." And so it was that on a summer afternoon I set forth to Lewisham, little dreaming that within a week the affair in which I was engaging would be the eager debate of all England. It was late that evening before I returned to Baker Street and gave an account of my mission. Holmes lay with his gaunt figure stretched in his deep chair, his pipe curling forth slow wreaths of acrid tobacco, while his eyelids drooped over his eyes so lazily that he might almost have been asleep, were it not that at any halt or questionable passage of my narrative they half lifted, and two grey eyes as bright and keen as rapiers transfixed me with their searching glance. "The Haven is the name of Mr. Josiah Amberley's house," I explained. "I think it would interest you, Holmes. It is like some penurious patrician who has sunk into the company of its inferiors. You know that particular quarter, the monotonous brick streets, the weary suburban highways. Right in the middle of them, a little island of ancient culture and comfort, lies this old home, surrounded by a high sun-baked wall, mottled with lichens and topped with moss. The sort of wall—" "Cut out the poetry, Watson," said Holmes severely. "I note that it was a high brick wall." "Exactly. I should not have known which was the Haven had I not asked a lounger who was smoking in the street. I have a reason for mentioning him. He was a tall, dark, heavily mustached, rather military-looking man. He nodded in answer to my inquiry and gave me a curiously questioning glance, which came back to my memory a little later. I had hardly entered the gateway before I saw Mr. Amberley coming down the drive. I only had a glimpse of him this morning, and he certainly gave me the impression of a strange creature, but when I saw him in full light, his appearance was even more abnormal. I have, of course, studied it, and yet I should be interested to have your impression," said Holmes. "He seemed to me like a man who was literally bowed down by care. His back was curved as though he carried a heavy burden, yet he was not the weakling that I had at first imagined, for his shoulders and chest have the framework of a giant, though his figure tapers away into a pair of spindled legs. Left shoe wrinkled, right one smooth." "I did not observe that." "No, you wouldn't. I spotted his artificial limb. But proceed." "I was struck by the snarky locks of grizzled hair which curled from under his old straw hat, and his face, with its fierce, eager expression and the deeply lined features." "Very good, Watson. What did he say?" "He began pouring out the story of his grievances. We walked down the drive together, and of course I took a good look round. I have never seen a worse-kept place. The garden was all running to seed, giving me an impression of wild neglect in which the plants had been allowed to find the way of nature rather than of art. How any decent woman could have tolerated such a state of things, I don't know. The house, too, was slatternly to the last degree, but the poor man seemed himself to be aware of it, and to be trying to remedy it, for a great pot of green paint stood in the center of the hall, and he was carrying a thick brush in his left hand. He'd been working on the woodwork. He took me into his dingy sanctum, and we had a long chat. Of course, he was disappointed that you had not come yourself. I hardly expected," he said, "that so humble an individual as myself, especially after my heavy financial loss, could obtain the complete attention of so famous a man as Mr. Sherlock Holmes." I assured him that the financial question did not arise. "No, of course, it is art for art's sake with him," said he. "But even on the artistic side of crime, he might have found something here to study. And human nature, Dr. Watson, the black ingratitude of it all. When did I ever refuse one of her requests? Was ever a woman so pampered? And that young man, he might have been my own son. He had the run of my house, and yet see how they have treated me. Oh, Dr. Watson, it is a dreadful, dreadful world." That was the burden of his song for an hour or more. He had, it seems, no suspicion of an intrigue. They lived alone, save for a woman who comes in by the day and leaves every evening at 6. On that particular evening, old Amberley, wishing to give his wife a treat, had taken 2 upper circle seats at the Haymarket Theatre. At the last moment, she had complained of a headache and had refused to go. He had gone alone. There seemed to be no doubt about the fact, for he produced the unused ticket which he had taken for his wife. "That is remarkable, most remarkable," said Holmes, whose interest in the case seemed to be rising. "Pray continue, Watson. I find your narrative most arresting. Did you personally examine this ticket? You did not, perchance, take the number?" "It so happens that I did," I answered with some pride. "It chanced to be my old school number, 31, and so is stuck in my head." "Excellent, Watson!" "His seat, then, was either 30 or 32. "Quite so," I answered with some mystification. "And on B row." "That is most satisfactory. What else did he tell you?" "He showed me his strong room, as he called it. It really is a strong room, like a bank, with iron door and shutter, burglar-proof, as he claimed. However, the woman seems to have had a duplicate key, and between them they had carried off some £7,000 worth of cash and securities." "Securities? How could they dispose of those?" "He said that he had given the police a list and that he hoped they would be unsaleable. He had got back from the theater about midnight and found the place plundered, the door and window open, and the fugitives gone. There was no letter or message, nor has he heard a word since. He at once gave the alarm to the police." Holmes brooded for some minutes. "You say he was painting. What was he painting?" "Well, he was painting the passage, but he had already painted the door and woodwork of this room I spoke of. Does it not strike you as a strange occupation in the circumstances? One must do something to ease an aching heart." That was his own explanation. "It was eccentric, no doubt, but he is clearly an eccentric man. He tore up one of his wife's photographs in my presence, tore it up furiously in a tempest of passion. 'I never wish to see her face again,' he shrieked." "Anything more, Watson?" "Yes. One thing which struck me more than anything else. I had driven to the Blackheath station and had caught my train there, when, just as it was starting, I saw a man dart into the carriage next to my own. You know that I have a quick eye for faces, Holmes. It was undoubtedly the tall, dark man whom I had addressed in the street. I saw him once more at London Bridge, and then I lost him in the crowd. But I am convinced that he was following me." No doubt," said Holmes. "A tall, dark, heavily mustached man, you say, with gray-tinted sunglasses. Holmes, you are a wizard." "I did not say so, but he had gray-tinted sunglasses." "And a Masonic tie-pin?" "Holmes!" "Quite simple, my dear Watson. But let us get down to what is practical. I must admit to you that the case, which seemed to me to be so absurdly simple as to be hardly worth my notice, is rapidly assuming a very different aspect. It is true that though in your mission you have missed everything of importance, yet even those things which have obtruded themselves upon your notice give rise to serious thought." "What have I missed?" "Don't be so hurt, my dear fellow. You know that I am quite impersonal. No one else would have done better. Some possibly not so well, but clearly you have missed some vital points. What is the opinion of the neighbors about this man Amberley and his wife? That surely is of importance. What of Dr. Ernest? Was he the gay Lothario one would expect? With your natural advantages, Watson, every lady is your helper and accomplice. What about the girl at the post office, or the wife of the greengrocer? I can picture you whispering soft nothings with the young lady at the Blue Anchor and receiving hard somethings in exchange. All this you have left undone. It can still be done. It has been done. Thanks to the telephone and the help of the yard, I can usually get my essentials without leaving this room. As a matter of fact, my information confirms the man's story. He has the local repute of being a miser, as well as a harsh and exacting husband. That he had a large sum of money in that strong room of his is certain. So also is it that young Dr. Ernest, an unmarried man, played chess with Amberley and probably played the fool with his wife. All this seems plain sailing, and one would think that there was no more to be said, and yet, where lies the difficulty? In my imagination, perhaps. Well, leave it there, Watson. Let us escape from this weary workaday world by the side door of music. Karina sings tonight at the Albert Hall, and we still have time to dress, dine, and enjoy. In the morning, I was up betimes, but some toast crumbs and 2 empty eggshells told me that my companion was earlier still. I found a scribbled note upon the table. Dear Watson, there are 1 or 2 points of contact which I should wish to establish with Mr. Josiah Amberley. When I have done so, we can dismiss the case, or not. I would only ask you to be on hand about 3 o'clock, as I conceive it possible that I may want you. S.H. I saw nothing of Holmes all day, but at the hour named he returned, grave, preoccupied, and aloof. At such times it was wiser to leave him to himself. Has Amberley been here yet? No. I am expecting him. He was not disappointed, for presently the old fellow arrived with a very worried and puzzled expression upon his austere face. I've had a telegram, Mr. Holmes. I can make nothing of it. He handed it over, and Holmes read it aloud. Come at once without fail. Can give you information as to your recent loss. Elman, the vicarage. Dispatched at 2:10 from Little Purlington, said Holmes. Little Purlington is in Essex, I believe, not far from Frenton. Well, of course you will start at once. This is evidently from a responsible person, the vicar of the place. Where is my Crockford? Yes, here we have him. J.C. Elman, M.A., living of Mossmore, cum Little Purlington. Look up the trains, Watson. There's one at 5:20 from Liverpool Street. Excellent. You had best go with him, Watson. He may need help or advice. Clearly, we have come to a crisis in this affair. But our client seemed by no means eager to start. It's perfectly absurd, Mr. Holmes, he said. What can this man possibly know of what has occurred? It is a waste of time and money. He would not have telegraphed to you if he did not know something. Wire at once that you are coming. I don't think I shall go. Holmes assumed his sternest aspect. It would make the worst possible impression both on the police and upon myself, Mr. Amberley, if when so obvious a clue arose, you should refuse to follow it up. We should feel that you are not really in earnest in this investigation. Our client seemed horrified at the suggestion. Why, of course I shall go, if you look at it in that way, said he. On the face of it, it seems absurd to suppose that this person knows anything. But if you think, I do think, said Holmes with emphasis. And so we were launched upon our journey. Holmes took me aside before we left the room and gave me one word of counsel, which showed that he considered the matter to be of importance. Whatever you do, see that he really does go, said he. Should he break away or return, get to the nearest telephone exchange and send the single word, bolted. I will arrange here that it shall reach me wherever I am. We'll continue our story on our next episode. We are always on the hunt for great stories like these to feature on the show. You can send your suggestions to bigvoicejay@gmail.com. We've got a YouTube channel full of stories from the show. go to tiny.cc/BVJ Bedtime. If you found some value in our storytelling tonight, don't forget to show the love. There's a Buy Me a Coffee link on every post. Thank you so much for listening. Good night.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.